Forbes Magazine said they're one of 4 technologies innovating mental health, and Elle Magazine was quoted saying they couldn't stop talking about their good mood and hypercharged focus. They've been proven in multiple published studies, treated over 100,000 patients, and are prescribed by more than 14,000 doctors and providers. You can see countless reviews on their website where people all over the globe share the belief the device provided for them, and I personally understand the impact that this specific technology can have on our mental and physical health. Welcome back to the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning podcast, where we bridge the gap between theory and practice with strategies, tools, and ideas we can all use immediately, applied to the most current brain research to heighten productivity in our schools, our sports environments, and modern workplaces. For returning guests, welcome back. And for those who are new listeners, I'm Andrea Samadi, and launched this podcast almost 4 years ago to share how important an understanding of our brain is for our everyday life and results. This season, season 9, will be focused on neuroscience, going back to the basics, and always with a focus on our productivity, results, mental, and physical health. Our first review with today's returning guest, Elle Roman, the CEO of Fisher Wallace Laboratories, on their wearable medical device that's cleared by the FDA to treat depression, anxiety, and insomnia, came in at number 11 of our all-time most watched YouTube interviews. Then episode 120 from last April of 2021, where I posted my personal review of the Fisher Wallace wearable medical device, remains our most listened to episode of all time with over 6,000 downloads. I put a link in the show notes to watch our first interview, where Elle Roman says it's his all-time favorite interview. I think it's neat to look back now to when I had no idea that a device like this even existed, to see how it improved my sleep by much more than the gold standard of 20 minutes each night. I'm sure as the CEO of this company, Elle has heard it all. I remember having this deer in the headlights look when I was first learning about this device, because I didn't even know there was something that I could use at home that could help me to improve my sleep and levels of anxiety that also supports people who are suffering from depression. I'm pretty open on this podcast that depression runs in my family, and it's one of the reasons I left Toronto for Arizona, where I could find most days where we have sunshine and I could exercise outside year-round. This change of location has helped me to find the balance that I needed, but not everyone can just pick up and move to a new location for a better climate. Elle Roman himself was open with his past history with depression and how the device has helped him as well. So after I released our interview and then my review of the device, I was surprised at how many emails and correspondence I received from people all over the world with questions. I think most people just want to make sure that I'm a real person over here. And if you've ever emailed me, I answer every email within 24 hours. Most people wanted to know, do you still use the Fisher Wallace device? And the answer is yes, every morning as a part of my daily routine. I couldn't imagine life without it. In fact, I've had this question come through so many times that I did a review 1 year later after my personal review of the Fisher Wallace device just last summer, so I could point people there who've asked me this question of, do I still use the device? I've said it often on this podcast that most of us will struggle with a mental health issue in our lifetime. We launched the year with episode 268 on prioritizing our mental health in 2023, building self-awareness and resilience in the new year. And we started with a quote from Julie Smith, the author of Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before, reminding us that our mental health is just as important as our physical health. So when I saw an email from Elle Roman about a new product they were releasing, I immediately emailed him to see if he would come back on the podcast. Today, I want to welcome back the CEO of Fisher Wallace, Elle Roman, to reconnect since our first interview that received more feedback and comments than I imagined. helping all of those who've tuned into that first interview and my personal review or that episode 1 year later. Let's welcome Kelly Roman and see what's happening over at Fisher Wallace since our first interview back in February of 2021. Welcome back, Kelly Roman. Thank you so much for meeting me in this super early time slot and being so responsive to speaking again. How's everything going over there?
It's been incredibly exciting. Kind of nonstop. You know, we finished our kind of clinical trial for FDA approval and submitted it on December 9th. So before December 9th, it was just incredibly intense working on that. And then we had a brief time to celebrate when we completed it and handed it into the FDA. Obviously, there's more celebration that hopefully to come once the approval is to come in. We're expecting that this year. And now we've jumped into fundraising mode, kind of off the back of the success we had with that clinical trial. So it's really probably the most exciting time in the business right now. And 14 years I've been doing this. To finally get that scientific evidence that validates what we've been doing is I think it's a game changer for our business, but also for the whole category.
Oh, I hear you. And I also understand how difficult it is coming from the field of education, even with the products we put into our schools. You've got to prove efficacy before anyone believes anything. I see a lot of notes behind you, and I love going into the inventor's mind. Like
I'm a whiteboard person, that's for sure. Yeah.
I love that. I love those pens, the colorful pens, and watching people put their plans down. It's inspiring for sure.
There may be some confidential stuff there, so at least hopefully the angles.
Yeah, you can't read it for sure. I don't see numbers or anything.
Okay.
Just squiggles. But Kelly, I've got to say that I was so surprised with the reaction and interest after our first interview. Like we were just talking, I had no idea even that there was such a device out there that I put on my head and it's going to help me with sleep. And then you didn't even really mention this whole improving my mood part. That was a shock. I didn't even expect that. And then people around the world started emailing me, like, what, are you a real person? Did you really try this? Did they pay you to say that? Like so many people want to know all these weird questions. But, what does this reaction mean to you? And how have you seen the world reacting to the device?
Well, I mean, I think because of the culture of and this kind of the way that drugs and pharma has and not all of it's bad. I'm not completely anti-pharma, but it's such a different approach that I think there's been a level of skepticism and a level of how can this really work, and that's why we've been so focused on the research and doing these and finally getting kind of a gold standard depression trial completed. So, it's kind of like when people use it, a lot of people have life-changing experiences using it. And so, you also get, even though you're facing skepticism, you also have the flip side of that coin is very enthusiastic, very, activated customers, right? And that has translated into us being able to raise a lot of money on StartEngine, equity crowdfunding platform, which has then gone back into research and product development. We have a version 2 product coming out fairly soon. The engineering will be completed. It's on track to be completed this summer. So, it's been very gratifying to have like our customer base, like there's like a circle, right? Where we've helped them with the device. They've invested. We're building new products that are then going to, help them in the future. And so that's what I'm focused on. I think the research will certainly put a lot of the scientific skepticism to bed, and I understand why it's there. You need large scale triple blind, randomized trials. And now we have one for depression. We're looking forward to getting it published in a journal. I think that's going to be a tipping point for medical community, the media, that having that journal publication. So we're focused on that one step at a time. We've done the study. Now we got to get it published. And the approval process would be no later than November is what we're expecting based on the review clock.
Got it. Well, what was really cool, Kelly, is that I've made some really good friends now that we now interact with on social media, because, people ask me, how do you use it? You put it on, and I say I do it in the morning because I wasn't doing it for any other purpose, like to get to sleep. So I do it just to calm myself down in the day. And some of the people were from my hometown in Toronto. And then you connect. I'm like, oh, I'm from there. I grew up there. And so then you start connecting with people, and, they realize I'm a real person trying this out too. I'm like, just try it. I don't know what it's going to do for you. See if it helps. Try it out and see what happens. Is that really what people do? They try it and see what goes on.
Yeah. And that's what you can do when you have a low risk device. Now, we still have a device that needs a prescription. We do have a wellness brand called Circadia. We don't actually put a lot of resources into marketing that yet. We're kind of waiting for the version 2 device before we kind of lean into our wellness. We want to really establish and build a prescription brand first, because I think once you can build wellness out of from a position of strength if you start with prescription. That's always been my philosophy. It's taken us a lot longer to get there, but I think once you get there, it's much more powerful. So there will be a point, and there is technically now, but I think we want to scale up our prescription to someone who's diagnosed even with serious major depressive disorder. 2/3 of the subjects in our trial were severe MDD. So that's a lot different than someone who, say, feels some stressed out, but, is otherwise healthy. And that's a pretty big spectrum. So we're focused on really making sure that severe part of the population is served, and that their science is there. But ultimately, I kind of refer to this category as the mental health care equivalent of the smartphone business. Is that it really is. It's kind of what you're getting to. There's almost no one who wouldn't want to use this on some level, because there's actually is a growing body of evidence that transcranial alternating current just improves brain function, right? Improved focus, concentration, memory. These are things we're going to start actually capturing performance through an app that we're building, so that we can show customers, hey, this is where you were at baseline. Your focus and concentration has increased this much, by week 2. So yeah, I definitely see a world in which these are as ubiquitous as smartphones. But unlike smartphones, I think the way to do it is to come in through a highly regulated prescription path first, to again establish that credibility with the science, and then expand from there into wellness and people who are healthy but want an edge, or maybe want some help when they travel with jet lag or something like that.
Okay, so one of the questions that I got asked a lot was the levels. You can have low or high, and I always blast it. I just put everything on high and give me the highest level. Nothing bad is going to happen, right? If you put it on the highest level versus low, why don't you just have one level?
Well, so we have one level. We did one level in the study, because in a clinical trial, you have to have consistent dosage, so you can actually have a scientific result, right? And so you can't have people using it at different levels, or one person using it once a day, another person using it 10 times a day. So you have to keep all of that, kind of as controlled as possible. So we selected what's basically the highest end of level 2 on the current device. So it's kind of the now we know that clinically that works. It's also the level that's kind of most comfortable for most people. I use it on level 4. Sounds like you do. But there's people who have put it on level 4. It's like, it's a little bit too much stimulation, skin, the nerve sensitivity. Your vision may kind of be a little bit bumpy. That's the optic nerve stimulation. So we didn't want to have it too strong where, say, 20% of the people would find it uncomfortable. So we were also like a little nervous, like, well, we don't want it to be too little because we need to have that clinical effect. So we took a little bit of a risk in, because we didn't have data on every single 1/10 of a milliamp, so we took a little bit of a risk trying to find that balance between comfort and clinical effectiveness, and we found it. And it wasn't completely blind to us, or we had a lot of information to inform that besides our own users. There's been some studies that have come out over the last couple of years on wearable brain stimulation that has set a approximate bar of clinical effectiveness around 2 milliamps. And we actually did a study, not we, but faculty at Harvard did a study with our device in 2015 that was published that didn't have great results, and they only used it on level 1 once a day. So we knew that we're not going to do level 1. And since then, we've been very firm about making sure it's twice a day, when you wake up and before you go to bed. And so level 2, first thing in the morning, last thing before you go to bed, that is the protocol we use in the depression study. That's the protocol that we have been recommending for all customers. Unless they're just treating insomnia, then once before bed is fine. And we did a pilot study on insomnia during the pandemic, had a 42-minute difference between placebo and active at week 4, which is a pretty big delta in total sleep time. I know you were tracking total sleep time. So we're planning to do a bigger study that would be again, a pivotal definitive insomnia study. So we're planning to launch that this year, planning to launch an anxiety study this year. We already have depression. So if we can get 2 of those, 2 more indications, anxiety, insomnia, that's the triple threat. That's a kind of a one device is the only thing you need to treat, vast majority of conditions in the mental health space. And thinking then we'll start expanding into wellness.
I had no idea it was going to impact me in the way that it did. When I put it on and I was doing this first interview with you, I thought, I'll just I'll review it for 30 days, right? That was what I thought. And then I thought, I'm definitely going to be sending this thing back because, I didn't want to have something that could help somebody else kind of thing. But right. I had no idea that when I was finished with the trial and I looked at how it improved my wake after sleep onset scores, that was huge for me because I could, now I track them daily. And if they get up I'm up an hour in the night, not that I'm walking around, but I'm awake and I don't even know I'm awake. That was huge for me to see that it reduced that. And then I didn't want to give it back because then I'm like, it calms me down. I had no idea, until I started using all these other devices that measure heart rate variability and stuff like that. I had no idea that I was stressed out at certain times of the day. And one of them is before I go to sleep. So I haven't been using it before going to sleep, but I think I might try and see would it calm me down before bedtime?
Yeah, I mean, it does for a lot of people, and it's that anti-anxiety effect from regulating sympathetic nervous system, kind of getting you out of the fight or flee. And there's some published academic research on transcranial alternating current in doing that. So there's a big connection, right, with anxiety and sleep quality. So it does help a lot of people, especially anecdotally from who are veterans who have trouble getting to sleep. And I've heard kind of over and over again veterans with PTSD who use this device that when they put it on, it doesn't matter the time of day. When they first tried it, they basically want to fall asleep immediately. And it's that flipping of the switch of the sympathetic nervous system that takes you out of that high gear. And once you're out of that high gear, if you've been in that high gear for a long time, it's an exhausting thing for your body to be in that state a lot. And so once you're able to flip that switch, there's just this exhaustion that comes in. And, it's hard to describe if you haven't been in that place, how relieving that is to have that kind of relief. And that's what we have heard a lot from veterans using it. So yes, it's a bit of a long answer that, again, it works differently in every person, but that we have enough data now that's seeing patterns in how people react to it.
That definitely helps, because you don't know when you're using something if I'm using it the way that I'm supposed to be using it. So I've been doing it twice in the morning, but I might try it before I go to sleep and just see what happens.
Yeah. That's the protocol we've seen be most successful, is morning, first thing, and evening. And it's also good just to create a routine, so that it becomes an automatic kind of thing that you do. Habit, everyone, habits are everything. So you create a habit with it, and that's the best way to approach it.
Yeah, and I've got to tell you, you probably don't know this, or people don't probably tell you, that if something happens to it, like it's not working the way that you're used to it working, something defaults with it, the way to replace it is so fast, because people depend on it. Now you're like, I love this thing, and so you send a quick email in, and I got new wires or something new, a new part came right away, sent it like FedEx.
It's so important. We do our best. I mean, I'd say we're good at that 98% of the time. 2% of the time, maybe we miss an email or voicemail, but we have people 7 days a week, so including Saturdays and Sundays, working customer service. And, it's actually unusual not completely unique, but for a medical device company to be selling directly to patients. Usually there's a distributor of some kind in between the medical device company and, say, the Walgreens that you get your cane at. So I think that gives us actually a clinical advantage to, if someone has any kind of, it could be a side effect that they may or may not have to do with the device. I mean, there's people who are taking medications while they're on the device, but we track all of that. We're able to give feedback. We have a very close contact with our customers who are the patients. So it's a high level of access. And I think the FDA actually really appreciates that, because then the FDA knows that, the feedback that we're getting is not being filtered by a distributor. It's just coming right in. They can look at the emails, they can read, we have to save all of that stuff. So it's really good from a quality assurance perspective. And we try to respond as quickly as possible when someone needs something. We're actually have a supply chain issue right now where we're waiting for product to come off of a boat in Florida that's been sitting there for something like 3 weeks. So that's been a little frustrating. That's out of our control, but finally those devices are going to be able to be shipped next week. And overall, we haven't had super disruptive supply chain problems like a lot of other companies, because we don't use Bluetooth chips. Our next version, called Oak, is going to have a Bluetooth chip, but the one we currently sell does not. That's actually been a lifesaver for us on the supply chain side.
Well, it was really cool as well that the person on the other end knew the device. And when I said, I think it's not working the way it used to work. Like, I don't know, it wasn't as strong. I say I put it on blast on the highest level, and you can feel it. Something happened. And so they knew right away, oh, you need some new wires. And I wouldn't have known that. I probably would have kept using it
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they know the device, which
Yes,
is
they're very the people. No one has under a year of tenure who's currently answer. So you get a lot of customer interactions in a year. So yeah, they're a pretty seasoned team at this point. They really know what they're doing. They will read updated research even on the category. You know, they're sharp and they love what they do. You know, they really love talking to patients and doctors. We get a lot of calls from doctors too with questions that are sometimes more technical and more complicated, but they're able to handle those as well. So if you're a doctor calling in, we can answer, you know, fairly sophisticated questions.
wow. I had no idea at that level, you know, just from what I'm seeing over here. There's so much
Yeah.
Kelly. There's a lot that I'm getting to see now talking to you. But so what has happened since the last time we spoke? So you mentioned at the start that you're waiting for the FDA clearance for depression, but where were things before when we first spoke, and where are they going now?
Yeah, so where we're at with the FDA, we had to get our, so let me back up a little bit. The device is cleared by the FDA to treat depression, anxiety, and insomnia, and it's what is called a grandfathered 510(k), meaning that this category of device existed even before the FDA started regulating devices in the 70s. So this category got grandfathered in when the FDA was created, and it took them until 2019 to actually modernize the regulatory requirements for this category. And you know, you can imagine, I mean, so this category existed before there was big pharma around depression, really. I mean, this is pre-Prozac. So now that all of this has happened, the FDA said in 2019, all right, we got to regulate these devices more stringently. So if you're a current manufacturer, you have until, and in our case for depression, December 11th, 2022, to run a full-scale FDA approval trial, hand it in, prove to us that it's, you know, effective and safe, and then we'll give you a new depression indication. But while you're doing that, while you're doing the research, you can still market your device because you've been grandfathered in. But after, you know, if you don't hand us evidence that proves that this works, we are going to, you know, take that away from you if you can't do that. So they said that for each of the indications, depression, anxiety, insomnia, each separately. Depression was the most stringent. That's the only one that we have a shot of full approval. The other two, anxiety, insomnia, would be reclearances. So we have now submitted data for all three. The most recent was the one in December for depression. Even though we handed data in for anxiety, insomnia, we still want to do, and again, that's the bar for that is not quite as high as for depression because it's an approval process. We still want to do another anxiety and insomnia study at the same scale as we just did the depression study, so that there's just no question of effectiveness. And you know, I have learned a lot in managing the clinical trial process here for a few years now. I had never done it my own, funded my own, you know, 3 years ago. So, so basically we've handed everything into the FDA on time. There is a clock, a statutory clock where the FDA has a certain amount of time that they have to review it and give feedback. And right now that date is November 17th. We have a date on May 17th where we have to hand in non-clinical data. So any testing that's like electrical testing and usability testing and that kind of stuff is due before May 17th. So we're getting that together now. And then between May 17th and November 17th is when approval or denial is supposed to come. We're not expecting a denial because we feel we've more than shown that benefit outweighs risk. and that'll be, we'd be the first wearable device to have FDA approval. There is no other one that has to date. So that would be a nice, I guess, feather in the cap. I don't like that, but it's nice to know that we're the first. And then version 2 Oak is going to come out. Well, it's going to be completed, the engineering, this summer, and we're still kind of figuring out the exact release date. Some of it has to do with the manufacturing ramp. Some of it has to do with parts. It does use Bluetooth, but it's just a beautiful world-class device that was designed by folks behind Beats and Nest and HoloLens, Microsoft HoloLens. So it just looks like something a big tech company would build. But big tech doesn't really play in FDA regulated wearables. So, which is actually good for us, because we don't have to worry about suddenly competition from there. They just don't do it. I mean, even the factory that you use to make devices has to be a factory that operates under like standard operating procedures that meet FDA requirements. And if you're an electronics manufacturer, you don't need to do that. So you can imagine how complicated that is if you're making smartphones. And you can't use that factory because they don't operate to those medical standards. You have to go do it differently. So those are why we're able to create something that hasn't been created before. And so I'm really excited for that combination of like the approval, the published science, and then this world-class form factor that doesn't have wires hanging down, that looks even better than the headphones you're wearing right now, which look good, but even better. And then I think, if you're on a plane, you're putting this thing on, you're like, oh, what is that? That's cool. As opposed to now, you might have some security come up to you. What are you doing with the black and red wires? Right?
Well, it's so funny, Kelly, because people ask me, "Oh, can I see a picture of you with it on?" And I use the model in all my stuff, because I look like a basketball player. It's like this. My husband's like, "Oh, you look so attractive with
the
that
terry cloth headbands," and I like that. I just go full, terry cloth, like 1970s headbands in my house. I mean, I'm like, I don't shy away from the fact that it's a headband. I try to have fun with it, but I'm looking forward to it not being a headband.
So is that what it is? I don't even know. That's why I contacted you, because I saw the thing about.
Let me send you a link right now in the chat here. Hold on a second, and it'll actually be great to see your reaction to it. Hold on a second. I don't know how much of this you can share. Let me see chats. Here we go. Chats. Okay. This is Oak. I will put you on the pre-order list. We do have some slots. I will make sure you're on that list. It is sold out at the moment. I'm hoping we can expand that.
I saw the email you sent out about your team, but that looks way better.
Yeah. It's a huge improvement, and it's waterproof. It's going to come in multiple colors, so you can choose your own color. Yellow, blue, green, white, dark gray, light gray.
I wear the Whoop device, and it comes with these fancy.
Yes, we want it to feel like that experience. Whoop is a pretty amazing wearable company, obviously. And yeah, we wanted to have that level of personalization and fun. Depression treatment can be fun. That's what we're trying to show people, right? Is that it's the experience of using the device, the excitement of getting real response. Majority of patients, not everyone, but picking the color, and I think having our app, which we're building, so you can do what you're doing with total sleep time, but also do that for anxiety, depression, cognitive performance, things like that. So we can give customers their data, and then if they allow us in an anonymized way to see how our customers are doing as a group, we're never going to have like oh, here's Joe's. We're not going to see that, but we can see, how are people aged, or in certain geographic, areas, or so that's going to be valuable data for the FDA to see, for us to improve our user experience. Give usage reminders, all kinds of things. So
I love it.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Yeah, I'm excited about it. Hey, we're still going to have the old one. We're still going to make parts for it. We're very likely still going to make it because we want to have a device that's going to be a discounted price to Oak. Oak is going to be $700. It has to be. Frankly, we're losing money technically on every device we're selling right now because we're VC funded, and that means we can cover things like research and product development. But the device today, even the one we have now, should be $700 or $800 to kind of cover all of our development costs. We're selling it for $300 because we want as many people as possible to get it, and it's still $300. We put that into all the stuff we're doing. But if we want to have, it's going to be a $700 product. Oak, we're going after Medicaid insurance. That's our primary focus on insurance. So we want to make sure if you don't have $700, if you're on Medicaid, you can get the device. Right now, we've succeeded in doing that in Maine, but we need a lot of bigger states to do that. And then I think we're going to keep our version 1 product going so that we can have something that's lower price, and we can do kind of exciting charitable things with it. It's just less expensive to make per device. So, what I'm trying to say, if you have our current device, don't worry. It's not like you're not going to be able to get spare parts for it if you need it. We're going to continue to do that.
Perfect. Well, I love seeing this. I love seeing where you've been, where you're going. And I've got to say, I do read every email. I'm on the email list. I read every email.
Oh, great.
For sure. I love it. And I noticed you were doing a first responder study.
Yes.
And I've got to say that, I mentioned on my first interview, my husband goes out and volunteers on the weekend, and I went out and shadowed him one day, and after 5 hours, I'd seen enough. I could barely function. I was like, I got to take a break from what I'm seeing. And I can't even imagine how these guys deal with the things that they're seeing, like suicides and, everything. Death.
Yeah, a lot of substance use related things that can be horrific, all kinds of stuff. The neglect of children. I mean, it's a very traumatic job. Yeah, that's one of the worst things, obviously. So it is hard to imagine it if you're, unless you're doing it. We've been working with people on the PTSD side for almost, we started, retired general on our board, who advisory board, who's worked with veterans for a long time. So obviously a lot of veterans in law enforcement. We started this first responder study in partnership with the Seattle Police Department. They actually came to us. Lauren Atherley at SPD was like, hey, he personally had been using the device, and he's like, I want to get more officers, and so he is running the resiliency program and some other health related programs at SPD. So he got Washington State University to be the study kind of research organization. So they're doing the clinical interviews, crunching the data and so forth. And then Salt Lake City and Nashville police departments joined. 911 operators from SPD started getting enrolled. And then a few weeks ago, we opened it up to anyone who's a first responder around the country. And we're pretty close to, there are a few spots left. Maybe if you have some notes for this podcast, I can give you the link for it. That would be helpful. So yeah, when people it's not paid, you're not paid to participate, but you do get a free Fisher Wallace device at the end of the study. And it's not a very burdensome study. It's it's a pretty easy one to participate in. Once we get that data, I mean, we're not expecting surprises like we think we're just going to have strong results. But having a study with that population will be helpful for us to then start partnering officially with other police departments, fire departments, and then use that as a case study for other kinds of jobs that are also maybe not quite as stressful, but are stressful. I mean, a lot of frontline medical workers, and I think we've been very much of a direct to consumer type company, but there is like a business to business side that we're planning to build up, which is basically on the biggest kind of idea of it is, if you're an employer and you want to help your employees, I don't care if it's a police department or a startup or a bakery, this is a pretty inexpensive and effective and safe way. You don't have to push medication. This is, a way to give your team the mental health support that not all of them, but many of them will need, and to do it, in a way that's private, and so that's what we're looking to support moving forward. I think there's been a lot of focus on the digital side of mental health for employees, apps that help with, cognitive behavioral therapy and other things, but there hasn't been like a hardware platform that is actually intervention. And I think that's been much needed. It is not easy to stay engaged in cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, if you're able to do the homework and stay engaged, it can be very, very effective. But a lot of people don't, and a lot of people they really want the treatment to happen to them as opposed to having to go. And sometimes after the treatment happens to them, then they're more open to engaging with a therapist. Sometimes or they could both happen at the same time. But I think that's the allure of medication, right? Is that I can just take something and it does it to me. That's what the device offers. And so that's actually, it's not just because someone's lazy. It's someone's in a point where they really need the help to happen to them. And then they can find the energy, usually and the motivation to do things like exercise more and eat right. You can't just suddenly start exercising and eating right for most people. There needs to be some kind of bridge to get there mentally. It's much easier to eat right and exercise when you're in a good mood than when you're not in a good mood.
Right.
So we need therapies that happen to you. And then there's things that you can do yourself that you have to get to.
Got it. And what I noticed, even with me going into this police department here in Maricopa, I saw the people that had gone from the field to desk because they had been overwhelmed. And so they, and they don't want to be there. They want to be in the field, but they can't take the pressure of it. So solving things like that within your department of those people that just need a bit of support and help that isn't available, that's what.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally. So I'm very excited. Lauren Adley at Seattle was such a champion for this, and we're again we're gonna. Someone's listening to this. There may still be a chance of enrolling if you're a first responder, but we can certainly we can help first responders outside of this program. So
right. Well, on a sad note, I was really sorry to see the email about the passing of Dr. Rosenthal.
Dr. Rosenthal. Yep. Thank you.
The founder of Phoenix House, the largest private nonprofit therapeutic drug treatment program in the US. And I remember in our first interview, we talked about how the device can help people with substance use disorder. Like you said, when you're in a better mood, you're going to make better choices. So, just, honoring Dr. Rosenthal's contribution to the world, what did he do as an early apostle for treating drug and alcohol addiction?
Yeah, so Dr. Rosenthal, founder of Phoenix House, he innovated the mental health and substance use treatment space by kind of making it a community program, a community based approach, as opposed to like just a hospital based approach. So, he believed very strongly that, people in the community kind of partnering together to overcome those kinds of issues with kind of in a similar way to Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's not like you're just going to a hospital, you're in a group with people that supporting each other. So he was able to create his own kind of version of that for substance use disorders of all kinds. And of course, he got more into opioid and other as he grew. But he started Phoenix House essentially in like the living room of either his or a friend's or colleague's apartment, with like 6 or 7 people that would come over and doing substance use treatment in a group. And so, by the time we were partnering with him, it was the largest substance use disorder treatment, the residential one in the country, had locations all over the country. We worked with the New York location, and there's about almost 400 people that came through our study, where it was basically people were offered, do you want to use this device while you're in rehab, getting the standard rehab care residential for 90 up to 180 days. And so there is a self-selection bias there. I mean, it's not like they were randomized where you just randomly give one or another a sham or an active device. They could choose whether to have a device or not. Of the people who chose to have the device, much higher retention rate. And these people did report improvements in sleep, if not feeling as anxious. And they were using the device like day one of residential rehab. So this is for many people like the first day that you're not using, right? And I mean, I get angry if I don't have a cup of coffee, on time. So it is a stressful experience to be in that early abstinence period. And so even though we're not going to make it like a walk in the park, if your sleep is better, if your anxiety is reduced, if your depression is reduced, it makes it somewhat easier. It makes it, and so, again, the study didn't really look at how much responsibility our device can take for it, but that group was much higher. They were staying in rehab and not dropping out. We've done some work with other substance use rehab facilities, and as you probably see in the emails, I occasionally highlight that's part of mental health treatment. Is they're not like separate things. There's mental health and substance use disorders are kind of hand in hand. So I think that was also something that Mitch Rosenthal made sure people understood, is that alcoholics shouldn't be looked down on and ostracized. This is he was before his time, and now I think if he even before he passed, I think he was here long enough to see how the tide is turning on how people talk about mental health, how open people are about it today. It's not as stigmatized. It's almost like a badge of honor now, more than, and so that was the kind of thing he was trying to reverse, that stigma, and humanize people who had substance use disorders, and make sure people are it's tied to mental health So yeah, very special guy. I had lunch with him a couple of times. Chip, my co-founder, knew him much more closely. They were more closer in age. I mean, Mitch was older than both of us, but had a full life. But yeah, Chip Fisher was quite close to him.
Yeah, well, there's such a shift now, even, what I'm seeing with, the wearable devices for health. And then it came out, these non-alcoholic drinks are taking over.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I've had a couple of those. They're pretty tasty. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a different shift towards health and wellness with, we focus here on the podcast with brain health in mind and just being open and just making different choices that, we might not have thought in the past, like having a glass of wine with your salad, the impact that can have, on a daily, weekly basis, and just make a different choice. And you make different choices when you're sitting there. And like you said, your anxiety levels are down. If you're happier, you're going to make a healthier choice. Right. I just see it all working together. I think it's brilliant what you've got going over there. Kelly, I feel like I've picked your brain. I know where you've been, where you're going. Is there anything that you want to say to kind of bring this all into a close for people to, learn more about Fisher Wallace, what you've done, where you're going?
Thank you. It's just a pleasure to be here. I'll plug the website, fisherwallace.com. It's FISHER Wallace, Fisher Wallace. We've really, as I mentioned, discounted our device thanks to our equity crowdfunding and our venture. So now is going to be the best price probably ever until we're able to kind of get our data published, and hopefully that'll be in April or May. And if you're a retail investor, you're interested in looking at what we're doing, go to Start Engine. We're on Fisher. If you Google Fisher Wallace Start Engine, you'll see our campaign page, equity crowdfunding page. We've raised something like almost $8 million on $7.5 million through Start Engine. Many of it from our customers. I couldn't be more proud of that accomplishment. We're truly a patient-owned mental health company. It's awesome. So thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you, Kelly. I want to thank you so much for coming back on the podcast, for all you're doing in the world. And I'm just so grateful for that first introduction, because you've done a lot for me personally, just trying out the device and seeing how it's going to help. And then the platform helping other people to see this device and see how it can help them. So I'm such a fan of what you're doing, anything to support our mental health and well-being as well as our physical. So it all ties in. For anyone who wants to try it out, go to fisherwallace.com, order one, try it out, and see what it does for you. And thank you so much for all you do, Kelly.
Thank you.